Cafe Luna, Seasons of Adventure, Volume 1, by Lux Lucerne. Chapter 3. Cafe Luna was never the type of shop of bustling crowds. Instead, it was renowned for its warm atmosphere. It was a place where all sorts of people could gather around a table and share a meal of food that carried memories and stories of home. It was a place of healing, with food that nourished the body and soothed the soul. But most importantly, it was a place where people could restore their hope and spirit. Warm atmosphere, good food, and smiles all around the table. It truly was a place of sanctuary in a world turbulent and cruel, wearing down souls with the harshness of reality. Though it is difficult to help others when you yourself feel lost, grasping for the sun in a dark forest. Business had started to slow ever since Lunadia received word about her father. It's been difficult to really concentrate. Though it had never been this quiet, with no one in sight. But in these moments of despair, thinking that she should simply go back to bed, the door jingled as it swung open. A cold, biting wind filled the room, and a female figure stepped through, face covered by a witch hat. Lunadia nearly fell off her chair in surprise, and quickly wiped her face. Welcome to Cafe Luna. Please take a seat. Would you like anything warm to drink while you look through the menu? Stammered Lunadia, as she strained herself out. The figure closed the door and raised the rim of her hat. There stood an older woman with silvery hair and a voluptuous build similar to Lunadia, though with more of a slender athleticism. A silver wand with blue gems at her hip glinted in the light. She looked exhausted and tired, though smiled brightly as she sat down at the bar. Settle down, Lunadia. It's just me. No need to worry, the woman said, resting her chin on her hand, elbow leaning on the bar. Auntie Nixia, what are you doing here? I thought you were researching something in Viventi, replied Lunadia. I was doing some field testing in the Vesperwood, related to the flow of magic for a friend of your father and mine. Her name is Lurosa. She's a mage in Flamia. But when I had heard your father went missing, I had a bit of a look myself, and now here I am, explained Nixia. Lunadia's eyes grew wide upon hearing this. She ran around the bar and hugged the woman tightly. Thank goodness you're safe. Did you hear about the incident in Spirit's Hollow? Lunadia said, face pressed tightly against Nixia. I did. The undead and spirits of the Vesperwood have been agitated. Well, thankfully I didn't have any trouble. I'm all right, dear. It's okay. Nixia said, gently stroking Lunadia's back. It's been difficult, hasn't it? I could tell before I even stepped in. You forgot to flip the sign to open, even though you had the lights on. How about we keep it that way and I'll make us some tea? Lunadia sniffled and nodded as Nixia patted her on the head. You go settle down in one of the booths. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. I'll tell you everything I know after you have some tea, said Nixia. Lunadia scooted her way into one of the booths and slumped into its softness. Her mind was racing, anxious and afraid. Nixia took off her bag and hung it near the booth, placed a hand on Lunadia's shoulder, and gave her a knowing nod. With that, she made her way into the kitchen. Nixia took in a deep breath and gazed at all the familiar sights of the kitchen. She placed a hand on her cheek and began looking through the pantry. She drew a wand from her hip, gave it a twirl, and filled the pantry with light. She ran her fingers over each drawer, tapping it with a clink. Lunadia seems quite worn down. Must not have been eating well since the news. Probably hasn't been sleeping well either, judging from the circles under her eyes. I think I know just the right thing for her. 4 Seasons tea, Nixia whispered to herself. Nixia quickly scanned through the rest of the pantry and retrieved 2 jars. One was filled with whitish yellow flower buds, the others bright green leaves. Windy chamomile from Faventi, airy and sweet like a refreshing breeze in spring, along with some snowfall mint from the mountains of Plutuvia, tranquil and cool like the fresh snow it grows in. Let's get those 2 steeping, said Nixia with a snap of her fingers. She took out a handful of each of the herbs and placed them on a wooden cutting board. Drawing a knife from her hip, she swiftly chopped them, making a quick and steady knocking sound. With one scrape with the back of her knife, she guided the herbs into a tea bag. She tossed it into a glass pitcher, and it landed with a soft plop. Next, her attention was on the pot of boiling water. She flicked off the flame and held her hand over the water. A bit too hot. They'll bitter the herbs. I need just a touch of this, said Nixia. With a wave of her wand, she whispered, a fluttering snowflake in the breeze, chilling touch before it fades away. She tapped her wand with a finger, and from the tip dropped a delicate snowflake, pure and white. It fluttered and swirled in the steam before eventually landing upon the surface of the water. A single ripple swept across the surface before becoming still. Nixia held her hand over the pot once again and nodded. Nice gentle heat. Just what we need, she whispered. Nixia slowly poured the water into the glass pitcher. A light amber color began to swirl in ribbons, gently bathing in the current. A sweet smell burst from the pitcher, filling the room with its energy like a spring breeze, full of gentle vitality. She took a deep breath and relaxed for a moment. Next she inspected the cooler, her eyes scanning over each option. She reached for a clear bottle with an off-white liquid. With one hand, it didn't budge. She smiled, and her eyes grew bright. She braced herself and hefted the bottle up with 2 hands. With a thud, she placed it on the counter and closed the cooler. Sweet cream from the continent of Jehana. Good stuff, too. Rich in vitamins and minerals and plenty of fat, too. Cattle there graze on sugar rock grass, which soak up minerals and produce lots of sugar, which all gets concentrated into their milk, Nixia said before placing a finger on her lips in thought. This will go down smoothly. Well, let's add a little something to lighten it up. Nixia poured the sweet cream into a saucepan and put it to warm on the stove. Meanwhile, she scanned over a shelf before picking up a bottle of golden amber color, which was warm to the touch. She twisted open the lid and wafted the sweet smell. Ah, fire blossom honey from Flamia. Sweet and warm smelling. This will be good to brighten up the tea and give it an energizing kick. It'll help keep the cream warm as well and prevent it from separating, said Nixia. She poured some into the saucepan of sweet cream, gave it a stir, then poured some more, and then just a bit more, for good measure. Off-white cream took on a flaxen tone as it swirled in the pan. She took a spoonful to her lips and sipped slowly. Sweet, rich, and warm, like drinking a dessert. A smile and a nod, she took the saucepan off the stove and poured it into the pitcher of tea, which had developed to a dark, rich amber. Ribbons of cream danced into the tea before hitting the bottom, becoming clouds of white in a sea of amber. The stir, a vortex formed and blended the sky and the sea, forming a light caramel color, rich and full-bodied. Placing the pitcher on a serving board along with a pair of cups and plates, she made her way out of the kitchen and into the dining area. Upon opening the door, a wave of warmth swept across the cafe and filled it with a sweet smell. Lunaria took in a deep breath, in and out. Her face relaxed, and she looked over with a shine in her eyes. 4 Seasons tea. It smells good, and very nostalgic. The first time you made this tea for me was when I first started to learn magic. It was a real struggle to control my magic back then. It felt like a powerful river about to push me over. I was really afraid I couldn't handle it, and it really wore me down, said Lunadia, closing her eyes and thinking back. But then you sat me down one day and served me this tea. It was really soothing and cozy. After you told me how the ingredients for it come from all over the world, it really made me want to get stronger and see all those places for myself one day. You were very anxious back then. The pool of mana was far greater than any other novice's. You were always afraid of hurting someone if you lost control, Nixia said, before looking at Lunadia with a smile. You've grown into a fine young lady, Lunadia. You've really found your vision, using your magic to protect and heal others. I'm very proud of you. Lunadia looked down and held her hands together. Thank you. It means a lot to hear. Nixia smiled and nodded. She placed the platter on the table and poured a cup for both of them. The room was filled with that sense of compassion and safety that had been absent. While Lunadia indulged in the sweet smell of the tea, remembering happy times, Nixia reached into the bag she had placed near the booth and pulled out a box. Here, have some travel biscuits I had with me on Faventi, said Nixia. They're a bit dry, but they're nourishing and a touch sweet. Very nice, dunked with tea. Lunadia and Nixia both clapped their hands together and bowed in thanks. Then Lunadia opened the box and delicately picked up one of the round biscuits. With 2 hands she held it up to her face and gave it a nibble. Eyes closed, she chewed the biscuit, focusing on its texture and flavor. They were dry and crumbly, slightly sweet, if a bit floury. She swallowed and dunked the biscuit in her tea and had another bite. The biscuit softened and the tea intensified the flavors, adding a rich sweetness. Then she raised the teacup to her lips, sipping slowly. The tea was rich and creamy, sweet and warm. The ribbons of rich cream, full-bodied and smooth, were like a warm blanket enveloping her. The honey added a warm sweetness, like sitting by the fireplace. The warmth spread across her body as she swallowed the tea, leaving a light and airy flavor in her mouth. Floral and sweet, like the winds of spring swirling around you, with a slight cool tingling, a refreshing mist of mint. By the time she knew it, the cup was upside down with not a drop left. She placed the cup down onto the table with a slight clink and let out a big sigh. Warm and calm, her body now relaxed, as any tension she had was melted away. Good, isn't it, Lunadia? An ingredient from each of the continents. Quite harmonious, if I say so myself, said Nixia, nodding. Windy chamomile and snowfall mint are quite a favorite of mine. They're quite soothing, aren't they? It's felt like ages since I've had something so good. Chihan and sweet cream normally makes me feel like taking a nap after having some, since it's so heavy. And with the fire blossom honey, it's quite warm and cozy, like sitting by the fireplace, said Lunadia, placing her hands on her cheeks in joy. I think I'll have another cup. I need some more biscuits. For the first time in a long time, that smile of hers reached her eyes. A joy that filled her heart to the brim. Nixia, who had been watching her, sighed with relief and smiled. She stood up and poured Lunadia another cup. Have as much as you like. There's plenty to go around, and I know you like your sweets. I'm very glad you like it, said Nixia. Lunadia had enjoyed this brief respite of normality, but not before long. There was but a few biscuits remaining, and most of the tea was drunk. She slumped in her seat, patted her soft belly, and let out a satisfied sigh. She still had some worries, though a meal with company certainly did help. Eating alone really can't compare to a good meal with others, she thought. After resting for some time, she sat up and looked at Nixia with tensed eyebrows and an intense gaze. I'm ready now. Do you have any information about my father? What's really been going on? Said Lunadia, resolute. Nixia nodded. She placed her elbows on the table and rested her chin on crossed fingers. Well, let's start with what you know and what you think, said Nixia with a calm, steady gaze. The Guild Association in Faventi sent me a letter saying there was an airship crash, and my father was missing. That's all I know for certain, said Lunadia, before her throat grew tight. Worried. Something very bad happened. Don't want him to just disappear like my mother did. It is true that there was an airship crash, nodded Nixia. She averted her gaze for a moment and tapped her finger on her cheek. He didn't tell you where he was going, did he? You know how he is. All of a sudden, he'll get up, just go somewhere without telling me, and come back out of nowhere. Always bothers me when he does that. But at least he'd always come back home safe, bring home some nice ingredients, said Lunadia. She let out a big sigh. Oh, this time is different. He left a note saying he had something to do in Faventi, and he might be gone for a while. He's been like that for as long as I've known him, Nixia replied, shaking her head. As for where he was going, it was likely the Caelian Isles. The airship crash was located near the Sylvan Updraft, which is the only entrance to the Isles. Caelian Isles? The legendary Sky Islands? Nadia said with raised eyebrows. Home of the Windloomies? Those plump little elemental birds? Correct. The very islands that were raised up by Ventius, the divine beast of wind and guardian of Aventi, to create a sanctuary for ancient people seeking refuge, Nixia recounted, calm and steady. Those people would become the wards of the divine beast, becoming the first Windloomies and users of wind magic. Why in the world would he be going there? Isn't the Sylvan Updraft incredibly difficult to traverse? Can't he just tell me about what he's doing? Muttered Lunadia. I'm sorry he worries you like that. He has his reasons for why he acts like that. But I understand how it makes you feel. Nixia shook her head and let out a sigh. It really does bother me, replied Lunadia. She held a hand on her chest with downcast eyes. Makes me feel like one day I'm just going to be all by myself. You're never alone, Lunadia, Nixia reassured in a steady, firm tone. No matter the situation, the things you've learned, the memories you've shared, they all manifest themselves in who you are today. Like a torch passed on to you, will shine for a brighter tomorrow. Lunadia went silent and listened. As for the matter at hand, he hasn't disappeared. He isn't going away forever, continued Nixia. If he says he'll be back, he will. We're all living under the same sky, far apart, but still together at the same time. Can you be so sure? Whispered Lunadia. Alberin may seem brash, but he isn't impulsive. He isn't reckless. At times the world calls out to him, and he follows his instincts, though always with intent, not impulse, said Nixia before showing a big smile. Everything he does is to help others, just as how your mother Adeline acts. The same way you are. I trust and have faith in that. Oh, what's so important that he just vanishes sometime? Nadia returned, eyebrows tensed. Now that is something you need to ask your father himself. He's strong, though raising a daughter has been a new challenge for him. He has his reasons for why things are the way they are. Now that you're older, he may let you in on things more, explained Nixia. Nadia took in a deep breath and then let it out, exhausted. As for why this time is a bit different, you've heard of the illness going around, haven't you? Nixia asked. I have. People are ending up like they've had their life drained out of them, replied Lunadia. She paused and clenched her hands together. And in bad cases, you go cold like you're dying of hypothermia. You're half awake, stuck in a nightmare. Wary of the black snow. The ailment is called rime plague, Nixia said with absolute seriousness. It was first seen 15 years ago, though it had been contained before the public got exposed. It's an ailment of magical nature, similar to the life-draining effects of the undead. The problem lies in the fact that with severe cases, it doesn't go away with rest. It freezes the soul, extinguishing the flame that drives you. 15 years ago. Isn't that when my... Nadia whispered. And Nadia tried to think back all those years ago, trying to remember what happened exactly. And she looked at Nixia, resting her chin on her hand, her face stern. Nixia didn't waver and didn't say a word. The finger tapped the side of her nose for but a moment. This is all too much. Just anxious and afraid, and I just don't know what to do with myself. He's always been there when I needed him. Even when he went away on a trip, he would always come back with a smile. Keep thinking. Open the front door and come in. But he doesn't. Even the smallest things in the cafe remind me of him. Nadia let out. I'm scared and confused. Is he out there alive? Was he defeated? Is he okay? What if, all these questions and no answers. Don't know. I just don't know. Nixia listened attentively, without judgment. Though she did not act, her presence was welcomed and warm. A heart with ears, in a time where things that needed to be expressed couldn't before. I'm here for you, Lunadia. Get it all out, whispered Nixia. Sometimes I hear a noise, and I think it's him coming home. I run down into the kitchen, but it's empty. Such a constant presence in my life, and with him gone, my heart feels like it's being crushed. Chest feels tight, like I'm being choked. I feel so lost and empty. Can't stop crying at night. Keep thinking about him. So much more I wanted to do with him. So many things I wanted to say. Gosh. Never even got to say goodbye to him. He left. I don't want to live with all these regrets. What can I do, Auntie? What can I even do? What if he's still out there? I want him to come home. Home to Cafe Luna. Nadia clenched her chest with both hands, keeling over in pain. As your eyes once again let loose a great torrent as she wailed and sobbed. Nixia sat down next to her and held her tightly, gently rocking her like the waves. Then, as the worst of the storm passed, Nixia whispered one simple question. What's stopping you? Bringing him home?